Let's understand conditional statements in Python. In this video, we are going to take a look at how we can write conditional statements in our code. Conditionals are used to make decisions in your code flow. When you want to decide between multiple options, that time we can use conditionals. The conditional statements are written using if-else statements. These if-else statements are structured like this. So, if statement contains a condition which will be checked by the Python compiler, and if the condition holds true, then the execution goes inside the if block. So in Python, we can write a block using colon symbol and writing all the code inside that block by indenting the code. So if you have background in other languages, you might have seen code something like this. So in Java, for example, you would write something like this. Here you have the conditional, just like Python, but you would write everything in this curly braces. And all the statements inside the if block are written inside the curly brace. When the curly brace is closed, at that time the code block for this if statement ends. Python doesn't have that. So let's take an example of the Python code. Here I have got this age variable with a value of 10. And here in the if statement, I am checking whether the age is greater than 18. I am creating a block by using this colon symbol, and I have indented all the code inside it. So if this condition holds true, the execution goes inside and will print this statement. But if the condition does not hold true, the execution goes in the else block and it will print you cannot drive. So let's execute the code and verify it. If I run this piece of code, you can see that it prints you cannot drive. I have this age variable with a value of 10 and 10 is not greater than 18. That's why it prints this statement. If I modify this age variable to 22, and now if I try to run this code, you can see it changes to you can drive. So that way, if statements can be very useful when you want to decide between multiple paths. Now in the if statement, it's not compulsory to have the else block as well. Sometimes we only want to add an extra operation only if some condition holds true. So here in this piece of code, I have this age variable with a value of 10. And here I am checking if age greater than 18, then it will print this statement. If it is not, then it will not do anything and it will directly print this statement. So let's run this code and verify. If I run this, you can see that it only executed the last statement. But if I modify this age variable to, let's say, 21, and now if I try to run this code, you can see that it prints both the statements. So this way, if you want to add an extra operation based on a condition, we can write only the if block. Now this may seem little bit limiting because we can only choose between two conditions, but we can add as many conditions as we want. For example, here in this example, I have used this elif statement. So this elif statement allows us to write as many conditions as we want. If I wanted to check multiple conditions, then I can use multiple elif statements. So in this piece of code, I have this num variable which I want to check whether it's a positive number or a negative number. I have its value as -1. Here the execution will flow from top to bottom, and first it will check this condition. If num is greater than 0, it's not. So it will go to this elif statement and it will verify whether the num is less than 0. It is. So it will print this statement. or it will perform all the action inside this Elif block. Let's run this and verify. You can see that it prints it's a negative number. If I modify this to, let's say, 0, then in that case it first checks this condition. That's not the case. Then it will check if the number is negative. That is not the case. So it will finally execute the else block. So let's run and verify. Yes, it prints 0. Now the main important point with this if else statement is that it will execute only the first matching statement. It will execute only one of these 3 statements. It cannot execute all 3. So if the first condition matches, it prints this. If the second condition matches, then it prints this one. Or finally, it will print this one. So here we have to be careful with the sequence of if-else block. If we write the sequence in the incorrect order, then we may get a different result. So let's look at an example to really understand this concept. Here in this piece of code, I want to assign a grade based on student marks. I have this logic: if marks is greater than 85, then I want to give A grade. If it's more than 75, then it's going to be B grade. If it's more than 60, then it's C. More than 35, then it's D. Otherwise, it's a failure. So in this case, I have written this if block which checks whether a person has failed or not. Then I'm checking whether the marks is greater than 35. If it is, then it will print it's a D grade. And similarly, I have written these other Elif statements. So what do you think will be printed if I run this piece of code? Let's verify this. If I run this, you can see that it prints D grade. However, a student with 82 marks should have got B grade. So there is something wrong with this if-else block. This happens because we have this sequence of conditional checks in the incorrect order. So if I modify the conditional check in the correct order, in this case I have ordered all the marks in the decreasing order of their marks. So first I am verifying whether the person has got A grade, then B grade, and then C grade, and so on. So it will first check whether it's more than 85. If it's not, then it will go to this block. In that case, this is the first block that will match this condition. So it will correctly print a B grade for this student. Let's run and verify this one. And yes, it prints you have got B grade. Now in Python, there are few falsy values. These are the values that will return false if we check them in the if or elif conditions. In Python, empty list, empty tuple, empty dictionary, empty set are represented as false value. These are all container data types. We will see all of these container data type in the upcoming videos. We also have a range object with 0 value. It will also be a falsy value. Also, an empty string is considered a false. We also have false and 0 as the false value. In Python, there is a special value called none. This is specific to Python and it means an absence of value. So if a variable doesn't have any value, then that variable will have none value. It's very similar to null in other programming languages. If you have background in Java, you might be familiar with null values. It's exactly similar in concept. So let's see how we can verify if a variable has falsy values. Here in this piece of code, I have got this a variable with a value as none. I mentioned that none is considered as a false. So if I check not none, it should return as true. And if this condition is true, then it should print false. So if I run this piece of code, then it prints false. Similarly, if I modify this variable to, let's say, empty string, and if I try to run this code, then also it prints false. So that means none and empty string are considered falsy values. Now in Python, there can be nested if-else statements. So let's look at an example of this. These are statements which contain if block inside another if block. So in this case, I have got this outer if block which has this inner if block. In this case, if I am bored, then I don't want to study. Otherwise, I can study. But if I am bored and the weather is good, then I can go out. Otherwise, I can stay inside and watch TV. So this is implemented using nested if-else block because we are checking two conditions. If I am bored, then I have to check the weather condition. If it's sunny, then go out. Otherwise, I can stay inside and watch TV. So let's run this code and see how it works. Here I have declared variable bored with value true. And the weather is sunny. So if I run this, you can see it suggests me to go out. If I modify this variable to, let's say, false, and now if I try to run it, you can see that I should study. So this way you can implement a logic which will check multiple conditions. The same thing could also be achieved using logical operations. So we have seen logical operators AND, OR, and NOT. We can use AND operator to check multiple conditions. So here in this case, I am checking whether I am bored and also if the weather is sunny. If both the conditions are satisfied, then I can go out and enjoy. But if I'm only bored and no matter what the weather condition is, then I can stay inside. This block will only be checked if this condition holds false. Otherwise, it will automatically go inside this condition. Finally, if I am not bored, that means it will come to this else block and it will suggest me to study. So that way you can implement multiple conditional check using AND operator. Let's run this and it says to go out and enjoy. If I modify this weather condition to, let's say, rainy, and now if I try to run this, it mentions to stay inside and watch TV. Now in this notebook, sometimes you will come across these study prompts. These are some prompts to help you study yourself. I will also be including the solution for this for you to verify, but you should always try yourself first and then only check my solution. It is always possible that your solution could be much better than mine. So always try yourself first. Now in Python there is one interesting operator called ternary operator. If you have background in other programming languages, you can use ternary operator to make simple conditional check and assign a value to a variable based on this conditional check. So for example, here in this case, I have this is logged in variable with a value true. This is Java code, by the way. If the user is logged in, that means he is authenticated. Otherwise, he is not authenticated. So we can check, is student logged in? And we write this question mark, and after that we write the value that we want to assign if this condition holds true. After colon, we write the condition that should be assigned if the condition does not hold true. So if the user is logged in, the authenticated variable will be assigned the value true. But if the user is not logged in, then it will be assigned false. The same thing can be implemented in Python like a plain English. So in Python, we can write like this. If we have a variable age and we want to assign a variable is adult a value yes or no based on the person's age, then we can write something like this. Yes, if age greater than 18, else no. So it will check this condition. If it's satisfied, then it assigns this value. If it's not satisfied, then it will assign this value. So if I run this piece of code, then you can see that this person is an adult. In Python, there is one interesting keyword, pass. This keyword doesn't have any meaning or it doesn't do anything, but it can be very helpful when you want to compile a piece of code without writing any logic into it. Let me show you what I mean. For example, let's say I'm writing some code, but I don't have the exact idea on the logic that I want to implement. In that case, I cannot leave any block empty. For example, here I have this if statement, but I don't have idea what I want to implement inside this if block. So in that case, I cannot leave this if block empty. If I leave it empty and try to run it, you can see that it throws a syntax error. In order to make it compile, I can simply write pass. This pass keyword doesn't do anything, but it will simply make the code compile. So if I run this piece of code, you can see that it doesn't throw any error. It simply accepts this as valid code. So that's how you can use pass keyword. So this pass keyword can be used in any kind of block you are writing in Python. You can use it with if block, for, while, or you can also use it in methods, functions, and classes. We will see all of these constructs in the upcoming videos.